Mitchell Messenbrink putting on a show here in Lincoln. And the Nittany Lions have now won 64 straight dual meets. What a night of wrestling.
Action continuing in the nation's best wrestling conference this weekend. A Friday night doubleheader coming your way tonight. First, Nebraska collides with Michigan, then the dominant top-ranked Penn State Nittany Lions locking up with Rutgers. Coverage begins with the wrestling pregame, 5:30 Eastern, 2:30 Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Shane Sparks is here as promised. Let's start with Penn State. They're the number one team in the nation. They are the three-time defending national champs. I saw they won their last match 31-7, and Cale Sanderson said afterwards they looked tired. So, I mean, obviously the bar is really, really high. I mean, give us a sense of where Penn State stacks up historically. I mean, you know, last year was an incredible team, and I feel like you sat here, or I guess it was over there, right? It was this old studio. But, and we had this exact same conversation. So I don't have a whole lot of places to go on this, but I'm interested, like, are they better than last year? Are they the same? I mean, they're just so much better than everyone else, it seems like.
They are so good, Dave. I think this team has the potential to be better than last year. Last year's team, they won their 11th title in 13 NCAA tournaments. They beat the second-place team by 100 points. I mean, that is really hard to wrap your head around. I mean, some people are like, have people closed the gap on Penn State? Maybe. I mean, when you're down by 100 plus, yeah, you're more likely to close the gap. Exactly. Yeah. But last week they went into Lincoln, beat a really good Nebraska team, top 10 team. Mark Manning does a phenomenal job. Ranked wrestlers, a really good team. They won 8 of 10 matches. Mitchell Messenbrink, this stat to me, Dave, I'm always trying to find new stats to give it some kind of perspective. Mitchell Messenbrink, in contested matches, all tech falls. Did his match a couple of weeks ago against Penn State. He came in with an average points scored of 18. 2 weeks ago, he raised it up. And then he hangs a 20 spot in Lincoln. He's averaging like 20 points a match. I always joke when Mitchell Messenbrink comes to the big stage, the scoreboard is who you got to be watching, because if you watch the scoreboard, you can see it just go, like, it knows what's coming. These guys score points, and I think that's what's really been critical under Cale Sanderson. They don't really talk about results. They talk about scoring points, wrestling with freedom, wrestling with gratitude. It's very well documented, but you can see it in the way that they wrestle. Go out and compete. It's a great opportunity. This is supposed to be fun. Yeah, there's pressure. It's the Big Ten, but have fun. Trust your training. Trust your talents. They've won 64 straight dual meets.
It's incredible.
They have not lost a Big Ten dual meet since January 31st, 2020. And that was like a 1917 loss in Iowa City. So to answer your question, Dave, we'll see, because injuries, I mean, it's so hard to win. People don't understand how hard it is to win at this level. This is the Big Ten. They're doing this in the Big Ten. So things can happen. Circumstances of the day is always referred to. You don't know what's coming. But I think this team has the potential to be the greatest wrestling team ever.
Well, let's dive into tonight. They go to Rutgers. It's going to be a supercharged atmosphere. Rutgers has a good team, as we know. What are the matches? I know the heavyweights or the heavier classes are the ones that kind of have your attention.
Yeah, Scott Goodale's done a phenomenal job there in Piscataway. They're 10-3 this season. They're 2-1 in the Big Ten. Saw them a couple of weeks ago here on the Big Ten Network really wrestle hard against Ohio State. They went to Madison last Sunday, beat the Badgers. Those upper weights are really good. They got an All-American in Jackson Turley at 174. Shane Cartagena-Walsh has been impressive at 184. John Poznanski, an All-American at 197. Yaroslav Slavakovsky at heavyweights, an All-American. So they got some guys. They got some guys that can wrestle. And this is what I love about Rutgers. It's going to be a packed house there. Jersey Mike's Arena is one of my favorite places in the Big Ten to go. They come to compete. The crowd feeds off that wrestling team. They will come to compete tonight, much like Nebraska did last week in Lincoln. They wrestled hard. When you look at the score and you see last week 31-7 Penn State, yeah, I mean, Penn State's really, really good. But if you're Scott Goodale, you want to see guys compete. Another big matchup tonight I'm looking forward to, 133. You got a couple of Big Ten champions. Braden Davis was the Big Ten champ for Penn State last year at 125. He's up to 133. He's coming off a loss to Jacob Van D last week. And then you have Dylan Shawver. Shawver's 3-0 in the Big Ten, winning some close matches. It's the Big Ten, Dave. We talk about it every time. You better be ready to go.
All right, well, you are certainly ready to go. Tonight, you've got Michigan and Nebraska you'll be on the call for that. So give us a little bit of insight there. I know you like the matchup at 141, Hardy and Lemley there. Tell us why.
141 pounds in the Big Ten, Dave. You have guys like Kyle Parker, ranked number 2 in the country. The transfer in from Arizona State, now wrestling for Iowa. We got Ridge Lovett. Actually, Lovett is at 149. Brock Hardy was 3rd in the country last year for Nebraska. He's a hammer. He's coming off a tough 8-7 loss to Bo Bartlett. Crazy match last Friday in Lincoln. Vance Vombauer, he's a stud. He's an All-American for Minnesota. Sergio Lemley, ranked, I think he's 10th or 11th in the country. Really, really good. He's coming off a loss last week to Vance Vombauer. I'm always curious to see how these guys respond after losses. It's how are you going to respond? Because these guys, Dave, are so used to winning. Sergio Lemley's an incredible talent. All these guys have done a whole lot of winning in their career. So how do they respond when they get punched in the face a little bit? How do you come back after a tough loss? 141 will be a good match.
Well, this will be their first meeting this year. They wrestled 3 times last year with Hardy winning 2 of the 3. Tell me about Bo Mantanona. Looked like he might be lost for the year, but he has wrestled, and he has wrestled extremely well. I mean, it's kind of an amazing story, and he's got Bubba Wilson here tonight. So break down that matchup for us.
So Michigan the last couple of years has done a phenomenal job. Won the Big Tens in 2022. They were a trophy team. They finished 2nd that year. They've done a great job under Sean Bormat. They've had a lot of really good guys that come in, some great veteran leadership there. Lucas Davison, one of those top guys, a national finalist last year at heavyweight. So now those guys have moved on. Now it's kind of this new crop of Wolverines, and he leads the pack at 165 pounds. He's a beast. I mean, Sean Bormat, super high on him. He's coming off a nice win last week against Andrew Sparks in Minnesota. And with Nebraska, it'll either be Bubba Wilson, who's ranked top 10 in the country, or they got a guy, Christopher Minto, who's a redshirt freshman. So it could be a matchup of a couple of redshirt freshmen, and those are always fun matches to watch, too, because welcome to the Big Ten, guys.
All right, so that's the matchup tonight there. How about Ohio State and Iowa? These are 2 top 4 teams in the nation. They are both undefeated. Mm-hmm. Ohio State has not won a dual meet in Iowa City since Lyndon Johnson was the president of the United States. So it's been a long time. I mean, I look at these 2 teams, I say they're both in the top 4, but it still seems like the perception is that there's a significant gap there, that it would be still really shocking were Ohio State to go in there and win the duel. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't go shocking. I wouldn't go shocking, Dave, because I've just been doing this long enough. These guys you just mentioned, Ohio State, top 5 ranked team. I mean, these guys are really, really good. There is a path. I mean, I think there's a path with Ohio State. It's going to be tough on paper, which I could care less about paper, and nobody else does either. In this sport, you got to go get it done. Opinions don't matter. But a big matchup there, I think, is at 149. Mentioned Kyle Parko for Iowa. Dylan D'Amelio from Ohio State. He's an All-American, is really gritty. That's a matchup I'm looking forward to watching. Parko's been amazing. He's undefeated. He's been fantastic in that all-black Iowa singlet. But 149 is a big match. If Ohio State can get 149, things could get interesting.
Parko won when they matched up last year when he was at Arizona State. What about 174? You have 2 wrestlers who are unbeaten this year going head-to-head. Something has to give. 174
pounds is a great story for both guys. Patrick Kennedy, this guy has been a Big Ten finalist at 165. He's a great team guy. He's just a great culture guy. He wrestles when they ask him to. He's in a battle right now. It's one of the more interesting storylines in Iowa wrestling right now. Who will be the guy ultimately at 174? And Patrick Kennedy? Or could it be Nelson Brantz, who was an All-American 2 years ago, placing 5th? He's undefeated. I love Patrick Kennedy. He's one of those guys going to be heavy with the hands, super physical. He's a guy that when you see his name, and you got to wrestle Patrick Kennedy, you know it's going to be tough. I mean, he's not going to make it easy. And Carson Harchless, a great story for Ohio State. He's coming off injury. He's battled injuries the better part of his career at Ohio State, but it's great to see him finding his stride here. And that's going to be a great match. That is going to be, we call it kind of wrestled in a phone booth. That's going to be a lot of really, really hard collar ties, heavy on the head. When both these guys go to bed tonight, Dave, I mean, it's going to be one of those days. It's going to be, you better be ready to fight tonight.
They will know they were in a battle.
Absolutely, for sure.
So, 17 straight national championships for the Big Ten. They've never lost one in the Big Ten Network era. I like to say that the Big Ten now, if you really want to parse it out, I think the first win in that streak came right before we launched. But the network had been announced at that point.
Fantastic.
It had been announced. So there's no reason to think that won't continue this year, right?
I would 100% agree with you. I just don't see, as good as some of these other programs are doing around the country. David Taylor, former Big Ten and national champion for Cale Sanderson at Penn State. He's at Oklahoma State right now. I mean, I think that's sprucing things up a little bit. But you said something, Dave, and I will always want to mention this. What the Big Ten Network has done for college wrestling, I speak for all of us college wrestling fans. The Big Ten Network has changed the game. You mentioned Sergio Lemley. Quick plug for On the Mat. They do a phenomenal job telling the stories. They did one recently on Sergio Lemley navigating that last season, and it was really well done. So between the pregame tonight with Rick and Malik Amin, we got a wrestling doubleheader. The three greatest words for wrestling fans: Friday Night Wrestling. Friday Night Wrestling on the Big Ten Network. We got the match tomorrow. As wrestling fans, Big Ten Network, it's the big leagues.
Well, you've been a huge part of
It's
that
a real privilege.
success.
It's an honor.
It's really been neat to watch, and we know how passionate the fans are, and they will get a chance to watch here coming up this weekend. Really appreciate it. Have a great call tonight.